Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, you are coming over from Tony's channel or Leilani's channel, welcome. My name is Abby. I'm glad to have you over here. I'm a homeschooling mom of 4 and my kids are in preschool, 2nd grade, 5th grade, and 7th grade. So today's video is in collaboration with Leilani from Living with Eve and Tony from Thrifty Homeschool, and we are all sharing our own little bits of encouragement for the middle school homeschooling mom, or just maybe the middle school mom. I'm speaking specifically to homeschooling moms. I'm sure the other ladies are as well, although I know Leilani has a lot of experience with middle school, so I'm not exactly sure which direction she's gonna take it. So Leilani reached out to me a few weeks back and asked me if I would want to participate in a collab around this idea, and I was like, yes, I totally would, because I feel like there's not a ton of middle school homeschool content available on YouTube, or just like even in inner circles either. Middle school across the board tends to be the one that everyone's like, ugh. And for me, this has been the most valuable and rewarding season of homeschooling yet. And so I was like, I really want to share. I don't know which direction everyone's taking this collab. I tend to think of things like on a more emotional and spiritual level. So of course that's kind of the way that I'm taking it today, but make sure you check everyone else's videos out and just get some encouragement across the board if you have an up and coming middle schooler, or if you are in the thick of middle school right now. So I did write down a few notes of things that I don't want to forget. So if you see me glance down, that's what I'm looking at. But I just want to start off by saying that homeschooling is fun in each season. It has shifted, you know, the preschool years to like the elementary school years. The middle of the elementary school years felt different than the beginning of them. And now middle school, it has definitely changed as the seasons go on, and each season is rewarding in and of itself. Now, we have been homeschooling from the beginning, and from the very beginning, I get that same advice that everyone gets, which is enjoy the little years, they go by so fast, or enjoy them while they're young, and it gets harder. It's a different kind of hard. So you might feel physically tired, but then people will always say things like, but just wait till you're emotionally tired, and things like that. So it's never necessarily like you have these great years to look forward to. It's more like the season you're in right now, like soak it up because it's the best and nothing is better after that. That's kind of how it always felt to me when my kids were younger. But guys, this season has been so rewarding, and there has been so much good in this season. And so I hope if you walk away from anything from my video in particular today, you walk away feeling like this season is valuable, rewarding, worth it, and something to look forward to, because I didn't hear from anyone that this is a season to look forward to, and that makes me want to cry because I feel like this has been the best season yet. It was also the season I was most concerned about, to be quite honest, based on other people's opinions and advice. So you definitely get a lot of that, like the years fly by, enjoy them while they're young, and then that's it. And I'm here to tell you there's so much good in the middle school years. And there's a lot of memories to be made and a lot of togetherness to be experienced. So don't let people get you down. If your kids are young and you're like kind of starting to think ahead toward middle school, there's a lot of good happening here on this end of homeschooling. So my mom did middle school really well. I went to public school, but it was actually, not only was middle school like that traditional, like just difficult personal time for me, you know, like everything's changing, your hormones, your emotions, like your perspective on things, like you're kind of a little bit of an adult, you're still very much a child. Like middle school's rough, right? Everyone's like spreading their wings, practicing independence, really mean to each other in the process in a traditional school setting. And on top of that, we moved from Chicago to Miami. So it was like a huge culture shock for me. One I'm very grateful for, because I loved my years living in Miami. In hindsight, when I lived there, it was definitely like, you know, it was a big change for me. But so on top of all of that, we had a big move right before I started middle school. I left my hometown, I left everyone that I knew, and I moved somewhere that we had no family, no friends. My dad traveled for work, so it was pretty much just my mom and I. My brother was 18 and he had a life of his own, and for the most part, it was just she and I in this unknown territory with a bunch of people we did not know. Like, we had no lay of the land. I had no, friendships going into middle school. And so it was hard to establish friendships, relationships. And so I just remember those middle school years of just really looking forward to coming home to my mom, and just how well she balanced not only just the unknowns of our life and all the newness of our life, but also, my, you know what I mean? Like, I was all over the place entering into my teenage years, just ugh. And when I look back on my middle school years with her, I see that she really did such a good job of laying the foundation for a lifelong friendship that she and I have had. She was very much my mother at the time. She did not, she was not like the friend mom. She was my mom, definitely, but she paved the path for the relationship that we have now as really good friends, So I've always considered that when I have thought about middle school with my kids, just how I want that to be something that I keep in mind, that being the parent, still very much being the parent in my house, but just little ways and little things that she would do to let me be a little woman and also love Lisa Frank at the same time. She did those years very well. Specifics I can think of were she let me make decisions with her when she was decorating the house, when she was making the menu, when we would go to the grocery store together. She would let me make decisions. She would let me practice spreading my wings a little bit. She praised me on the things that I was good at. She never blew smoke, if that's the term. I knew that her affirmations were authentic, and she always sought them out. She always sought out some kind of affirmation, but I knew that they were real, and so I always took them to heart. And so when I had hours and hours and hours at school getting talked down to, getting made fun of, middle school was rough. It really was rough for me. Getting bullied, then coming home and not hearing like, Abby, you are the best baker in the world, which I wouldn't have thought was authentic and would have just kind of bounced off. It was like, that frosting you made, that was really good. That reminded me of one that grandma made when I was a kid. And those are the kind of affirmations that stick. Real, just true, speaking truth and not just blowing smoke. So she was really, really good at that. And like I said, they were not few and far between. She was constantly giving me affirmation, loving on me, reminding me that I was valuable to her. And that is something that I have really tried to do with my older two kids as they've gotten older. Because kids are like, you know how they say like dogs know if you're a dog person or not? Kids know, preteens, tweens, they know if you're being real or not, and they don't want anything fake. And so I can think back to how my mom just really encouraged me in those years and how she became a refuge for me, allowing me to be both a child and a little woman at the same time. And just really, Connie, job well done. This is me praising you in the gates, okay? So that being said, that's just something to keep in mind as I share maybe some of my reasons for things moving forward in this video. But one thing that I've noticed, one of the things I was most afraid of until we got to this point, and then I saw it being a very natural progression. So if your kids are in like 3rd grade and people are talking about letting them spread their wings and you're like, I don't know if I'm ready for that, you're not, because your kids are in 3rd grade. But eventually, as they get up to this like, tween stage, you will see that there will be a moment and there will be a shift, and there's a natural progression. And that's how it's happened for me, at least with my older two kids, where it feels less of a leading and more so a coming alongside. And there's a natural shift that happens. And of course, if you're homeschooling, it happens both in your home and in your personal lives as well as in your homeschool. And it's not as scary as it's happening as maybe it seems from a distance right now. And it's a beautiful thing. And I did nothing to prepare for it. I just saw it happen and then kind of went with it, and it's been great. So less of a leading, more of a coming alongside, eventually preparing me and her and my son for like a release in the future. So it's not just like you're slingshotting. It kind of feels more like, okay, I've got these little kids, and now it's like, okay, we're doing this in tandem a little bit more, and I can see the stage being set for a future now. That doesn't involve my guidance every single day, you know, when they're adults. So thankfully, God is gracious and allows that transition to happen naturally and not just all at once. But when my kids were much, much younger, I thought it kind of was just like, oh, suck up every minute because like, they're gone. So it's not like that. It feels natural. It feels good, and there's a lot happening here in these middle school years that are both precious and you know, just also, you're also seeing long term. So there's a lot to soak up, but there's also a vision and goals being set that you can see happening. That being said, of course, I just said like, oh, I saw it coming and I kind of went with it. I didn't necessarily just fall into like, oh, I'm where she's a middle schooler now, and so I'm just gonna step aside. I actually kind of saw it. There was a little bit of a tension happening because I needed to get with the program, and my kids, especially my older two kids, I'm bringing him into it a little bit because he's in 5th grade and I'm starting to see the same thing happening with him that was happening with her around this age, which is like, my kids are very agreeable, obedient, generally well-mannered when it comes to like listening to me and knowing like who's authority in our house. And so I could see there wasn't necessarily like attitudes rising or tempers flying, but I could see a discontentedness in her. She would, yes ma'am, and do what I asked of her, but I could tell that there was something unsettled, and I'm starting to see that in my son now. There is a desire to not be one of the little kids all of the time. But not necessarily knowing how to communicate that well, or not even necessarily knowing how to identify that desire in themselves, because they're totally unpracticed human beings. As they move through life, they're learning everything as they go, and while they're under the microscope of homeschooling. And so I definitely needed at some point to get with it and be like, okay, this is what's happening, and now we give them a little bit more independence. Now we give them a subject or two they can do on their own, or we raise the expectations a little bit, or we don't make them do every little craft and we let them come up with something on their own. And so I needed to get with it because I could see how these years could be a little more tumultuous had I not allowed that to happen as it was happening, because we did have a little bit of a bumpy time at the start because I didn't recognize like what was happening. I feel like I just spoke in like random words. I hope that made sense. If you're there at the same point in raising kids as I am, then you know what I'm saying. If your kids are younger, you might not quite get it, although you're smart people. I'm sure you can piece together the puzzle I just spoke to the camera. So I definitely needed to get with the picture as my older two have transitioned from little kids who just want the next activity to kids who want a little bit more independence, but also want to be obedient and not demand it at the same time. Okay, so I have identified 3 areas that I feel like are most valuable to me in these middle school years based on seeing my kids' needs and also recalling things that my mom did when I was a child as well. As I said, I would go back to that a little bit here and there, and just kind of my plan moving through these years, things that I've seen have resonated well in my relationship with my older 2 kids, and just, you know, if I can only focus on 3 things, these are the 3 things that I'm choosing to focus on in middle school, and they have been rewarding things. So number 1, this coming alongside that I've been speaking about, number 1 is spiritual guidance. I think that in my kids, I have never seen such a natural desire to read the Bible, to understand spiritual concepts, to see people through a spiritual lens as I have in these years. Something in them has changed around this time in their life, and they're no longer content with the Bible stories, and they want to know the everyday Christ at work in them, Jesus, and not just the little Sunday school stories. And so spiritual guidance has been really important in our home. It's also very important, as you know, setting them up for teenage years, young adult life, like instilling those habits right now. So number one, under that umbrella of just spiritual guidance, would be conflict resolution. Middle school, as you know, brings a lot of opportunity for conflict. Friends, hormones, issues, concerns, there's a lot of it constantly. There's a lot of processing happening. Their minds are becoming little adult minds. They're no longer thinking like children, and so they're seeing a lot happening. They have friends who are, getting themselves into situations, and, the kids are being faced with forks in the road constantly. And so conflict resolution under the umbrella of spiritual guidance has been very important during these years. That also means that I have to keep an awareness of spiritual things and not let my mama bear rise up every time, because I have to teach my children and model for them at the same time. Yes, that's unfair, but this person does not understand how much they're loved by God, and or this person, this road is destructive, and we should feel sorrow for that path and not judgment. And so it's been as refining to me in the process as it has been important for the kids. And so conflict resolution, middle school and conflict, they go hand in hand, but spiritual guidance, that is very important in these years, because what I want for my kids, so much what I want for my kids, is for them as adults to not be constantly facing drama and conflict from a place of just not allowing it to control them like it did for me a lot as a young adult. And I would get myself into people-pleasing situations or compromise situations as a teenager. My teenage years were rough, here and there. And it was because I wasn't seeing situations with an eternal mindset. I was seeing them as they were unfolding. And of course, that's kind of the middle school teenage brain, is this is more real than spiritual things. And so just trying to be that voice of reason and remind them of spiritual things in the midst of conflict, and allow them to use those situations to grow, because middle school has been the first time in their lives where they've experienced that mom and dad can't protect them from people sinning against them constantly, or from them getting themselves into messes as well, where in elementary school, we made every decision for them, including what time they took their vitamins. You know what I mean? So under spiritual guidance, I would say that's the most important thing that I've noticed, is just helping them resolve conflict, and not necessarily seeing resolve relationally, but resolving it in their heart and with the Lord. Secondly, would be just spiritual habits. So a lot of emphasis in middle school for us has been on Bible study, church attendance, prayer life, things like that, including some more Bible study time for my daughter and I after our older kids go to bed. I've allowed her to do some little women's Bible studies with me, and not just kids' Bible studies, and just started bringing her in to that world a little bit more with me. There's a lot of questions that happen in middle school, and I think it's been really great to walk it with her. And I'm seeing this with my son and my husband. Actually, my son just said to my husband this morning at breakfast, "Dad, I just wish that he didn't think I could hear him, so he wouldn't have said this if he knew I could hear him. I just wish that you know, because he goes to work with him every now and then. He was like, I like going to work with you, but I just wish that like everybody else could be gone and it could just be like you and I here at the house sometimes to hang out. And so I know that there's a little bond and a lot of conversations and walking through situations happening with them as well. So what's been so sweet about this season spiritually is being there to answer the questions at the right time, rather than letting curiosity grow and then like either giving them an answer that's not enough because the curiosity has grown to the certain degree, or just giving it too much of an answer because I'm unsure of where their curiosity is. So it's been a really great thing to walk this path with them spiritually. And then the last thing, the thing I had mentioned about my mom, is the affirmation is so important spiritually again. So anytime that I mention affirmation, I mean it in a spiritual sense. This is who God says you are. This is how I see you. This is how Christ sees you. This is your value. This is your beauty. This is your worth, constantly. You can never have enough of that if it's not done from a ego standpoint, but it's more so done in like a, this is who you are, don't forget it kind of a thing. Because I mean, even as adults, aren't we still having to remind ourselves that all the time? Like, I am God's perfectly always being loved child. There is nothing I can do that can separate myself from him. He sees my value. He said I'm beautiful because he says I am. I am made in his image. Like, these are things we're constantly having to remind ourselves of. So why not start when they're 10, 12, 14 years old? My mom did that with me, and that is now my inner voice. It's not, you're great because you did this, you're great because you can do all these things. It's, you're great because that's who God says you are, and that's all you need, you know? And so just that affirmation is so important. So number one, my focus on these middle school years, spiritual growth, spiritual guidance, so important. I hope that is my kids' foundation more than anything else when they leave my house. I hope that they met Jesus in these walls. And middle school, guys, it's happening here. This is where these conversations are happening. Second important thing happening in middle school in our house, and something that, you know, is so valuable, is not just independence and goal setting, but valuing myself as a mom, their independence and goals and, you know, futures. I don't want it to be like a shameful thing, or like, oh, I miss you sitting at my table, but you go do your science because you're a big girl now. Like, I don't want it to be weird. It's not about me. So just valuing that that's the season they're in, being excited for them. They're excited. What did I just lick? It's like a feather on my lip. They're excited to be independent. Do you guys remember how exciting it is to get a little independence? I can see my older daughter, when I let her, she has a desk in her room, no computer or anything in there, just a desk to do her independent work, specifically science and math. And she'll go in there and I can see her like just getting her little desk set up, and like, you know, it's just cute. She's like almost like working a pretend office job, like so excited to be like a middle schooler and independent and at a desk. And it is an exciting season for them. And so to be excited for them and to value that independence, and just to know like this is where it starts. This is where they're beginning to get set up for future goals, for future habits, and being excited for them and walking that with them, and valuing the things that they are wanting to be independent in, giving them independence. I had made a video last year about the 3 changes we made for middle school. I will link that up here. That is where we started with the independence. Most importantly has been the volunteer hours. That has been really good. It's given me more of an idea of where, you know, she wants to spend her time. And it's not like something that I necessarily would, like the Humane Society. No, we have always adopted our animals, but I wouldn't necessarily devote my time to the Humane Society. But for her, that is like so important. And so valuing that their interests are going to differ from ours, but letting them spread their wings and affirming them, you know, it's okay if your interests are different than mine. Because we are not trying to create little us's, you know, and that's, I think, something that I'm constantly, as a homeschooling mom who does, like I said earlier, control the time of the vitamins, like it's constant control. And so I can easily be like, are you sure you want to volunteer at the Humane Society and not at like our church's like blah, 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 you know, so it's important to value that independence. Now, third point, at the same time, it's also really important to remind them that they still have a seat at the table if they want to just be your child a little bit more. So, and that is something that my mom also did very well. So there are some days where independence is, you know, at a high. And then there are some days, especially around holidays or, you know, just days where you want to be around the family a little bit more. Like, I want to do this craft, or I want to bake with you instead of baking on my own, you know, things like that. And immediately allowing that to happen, because there's also a little bit of scary in the independence for them. And what I've noticed, especially with my daughter, and as, like I said, as my son starts to get a little bit older, is that she doesn't necessarily always want the responsibility of baking because she can bake now. Like, when she wants to bake, I'm like, great, you know, I love that you bake. It's so much easier for me, and you love baking. It's great because I don't always love baking, and now we always have dessert on a Sunday. But sometimes she wants to bake because that was what we did together. And, you know, sometimes she wants to do science with me because we've always done science together. And it's so important to like check my attitude and immediately let that happen. And again, that's also something that my mom did very well. You know, I could be as independent as I needed to be as far as my schoolwork, my homework, my schedules, my routines. But when I wanted to just sit down and play a game with my mom, or have my mom read a book to me in bed one night instead of me reading the chapter book, she always did. And now as a mom, I look back on it and I'm like, that was hard. She worked from home. Like, my mom had a full-time job at home. My dad traveled. We lived in Miami, and she had to drive me 45 minutes to school and back every single day, and took me to all my practices and all my things. She was tired, but I never saw it in her. And so for me, just like, that's very important for me, is to not let my kids know that it's taking anything from me for them to access me just as my child. Because ultimately, it's not about me. Motherhood can be very self-serving, especially when you get to these older years, because you want your kids to know that, you know, this is your efforts and this is your time. And yes, it's important for the kids to respect you, but also, like, motherhood is not about me. Motherhood is about Jesus. I want my kids to be able to access me in their times of need, because ultimately, not because I want them to remember me as this great mom, but because 20 years down the road, when they get themselves in a mess or when they need comfort, I want them to know that they can access Jesus in that same way, and that it's not a burden. And so it's really important for me to allow independence, but also make sure that they know that there is always a seat at the table and there is always a spot on my lap. So those are my three kind of areas of focus and things I've seen so much growth and joy in as a middle school mom: spiritual guidance, independence, and just being excited for them, but also making sure that I'm establishing that I'm accessible and that they are just fully my child always, whether they are wanting to be independent or whether they are wanting to cuddle up. And the last thing I'll say is this. I started this video by talking about how people would say, like, oh, the days are long, but the years are short, and enjoy them while they're little, and blah, blah, blah. And one of the things that that people would share with me a lot, and I think I mentioned it, was, you know, you might be tired now, but wait till they're teens, and you know, it gets more emotional then, you'll be emotionally depleted, I'll miss those years of being physically depleted, you know. And it's true, but they're not wrong when they say that to you. Yes, the toddler and newborn years, they are physically more demanding, and yes, these teenage years are emotionally more demanding, but that doesn't mean that it has to deplete you. Something that's very important is just being prepared. I have learned that it's important for me to now prioritize moments throughout the day where it's appropriate for me to catch my breath, to fill my bucket. It is definitely more important for me to be spiritually grounded now than it was when my kids were really little, because, like I said, the conversations, the things that are coming up and coming out in discussion require more from me than it did when my kids were 2 and I was like, don't hit because Jesus loves you. You know, it's much different now when you're walking through big emotions in these middle school years. So it's very important that I prioritize the filling of my bucket when it's appropriate, because if I don't, I get to this point where I'm just wanting to escape, and then I'm showing my kids that I don't want these conversations, I don't want this time, and it happens often. I'm not saying I do this perfectly, but there needs to be space in your life to rest, to reset, and to focus, and to not just be pouring out constantly, because as you all know, that's not possible. There also needs to be time set aside for you and your kids together as well, because some kids and all kids throughout their weeks and their months don't come to you with every single problem. And so I had like this amazing conversation with one of the pastors in our church. So my daughter, she loves to volunteer in our church's children's ministry, and she wanted to volunteer in the second service instead of the first service because she didn't want to keep missing youth group every other week. And so I said, well, if you're gonna do that, then I don't want to just leave you at the church, so I'll volunteer with you if you're okay with that. And I would love to, because she's so cute with the babies, and I was like, I would really love to see you with the babies. And the pastor said, you know, because my husband and I volunteer elsewhere in the church as well, and he was like, you know, normally I would think this might be a lot from you. This may be taking a lot from you, and I would really ask you to pray about serving somewhere else while you're also, you know, devoted to serving. So we serve with the juniors and seniors in high school. My husband and I both do. And so he wanted to make sure that we were still focused where we felt called. And he said, but there is something, he basically said, I want you to promise me something. And he talked about how his older kids, they got to a point where he needed to carve out the time and the space for them, and how, you know, with his younger ones, he's always made that space for them to talk, just to talk, where it's not awkward. So he said, you know, Bella's 12, she had just turned 12 at the time. She's turning 12, and promise me that you will make this a special time. You and your husband will be obviously driving separate cars to church on these days, 1 or 2 Sundays a month, and make this a special time where after you serve together, then you go and you have lunch together and you talk, and she'll always know that she has that time with you on the days that you guys are serving in the baby room. And I just thought, like, that is so wise, because I have so many responsibilities with my kids during the week, and I just don't have a time that's always set with her. You know, I'll be like, let's have a girls' night, or, you know, hey, you want to come with me to the grocery store? But having this time once or twice a month set aside where we serve together, and then the space is made in our schedule, and everyone knows, like, dad's already left with the little kids, this is when you and I go have lunch together. Those conversations and that time together has been so fruitful. It's grown into not only being like going to get lunch together, she loves smoothie bowls. So we always go and get smoothie bowls together after we serve together in the second service. Then I'll take her with me to the grocery store, and that's sweet in itself as well, because now not only have we had time together, but she loves to just like bebop around with me in the grocery store, and like, oh, are these the cutest little cookies in the bakery, and like meal prepping and planning with me, and grabbing some extra snacks for dance, and just kind of having a little bit more woman time together, you know what I mean? She loves all things home life like I do. She loves cooking, she loves tidying, not her room, but every other part of the house. And so it's sweet to have that little heart-to-heart time with her after we have lunch together, after we serve together, after as a family we go to church together. So those Sundays have been really valuable. And so that pastor had really just put in my mind how important it is to carve out that time so it's a constant for them before they need it, you know what I mean? Because I'm sure the day is coming up where conversation might get tougher, or, you know, it might be harder for me to access her. But I want to make sure that I'm always accessible to her. And she knows at any point during the day that she can come to me, and my son is the same way. He's really good about coming to me or to John if he's concerned or if he's going through something. But also she also knows that she's gonna have this one-on-one time with me coming up if she needs more space than, you know, we have in our day-to-day life. So 2 things, like I was saying, I'm ending with a thought. Be prepared. Personally, carve out some time to reset yourself, but also put some time somewhere, and however it looks. I never would have thought it would have looked like serving in the nursery with her, but carve out some time in the schedule where they can access you without having to approach you out of the blue. So that is my encouragement for the middle school mom. These years are awesome, and they're setting up for a lifetime of relationship. And really, I don't have anything bad to say about the middle school years. They have been a joy. They truly have been a joy. I really hope you guys take that message away from this today. It's nothing to be scared of. This has been an absolute privilege to walk these years with my older 2 kids, and I'm so thankful that the Lord has allowed me to have this time with them, this extra time with them during the day, homeschooling, and just really setting up for a future of hopefully great relationship with them. So thank you guys for watching today's video. I hope you feel encouraged. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments down below. Make sure you check out Tony and Leilani's videos as well. I know that they will just have so much wisdom to share as well. So thank you guys for watching, and I will see you soon. Bye guys.